Hey, good evening. It's Monday, August 24th. Great to have you with us this evening. I'm going to look at 1 Peter 2 tonight in combination with Proverbs 3, the passage we've been looking at. And there's a very interesting, tight connection here that I think will be an encouragement to you. Peter asks this question: for what credit is there if when you do wrong and are beaten, you endure it? But when you do what is good and suffer, if you endure that, this brings favor with God. And listen to this verse, this thought. For this, to this you were called. You were called to this. Why? Because Christ also suffered for you, leaving you an example that you should follow in his steps. He did not commit sin. No deceit was found in his mouth. Yet when he was insulted, he did not insult in return. When he suffered, he did not threaten, but entrusted himself to the one who judges justly. See, Christ had the power, and this is what Satan tried to draw out of him in the temptation in the desert. Christ had the power to right all these wrongs instantly, and he had been totally right to do so. But he chose not to, because he entrusted himself to his Father, because he had a greater vision in mind than just his own well-being. He had God's honor in mind. So he chose not to follow what he wanted, but to follow what God wanted. And you see, for us, there is risk in that, because we don't want to give up what we want. But you see, God hasn't called us to protect ourselves. God has called us to bring honor to him, to find excitement in following him, and yes, even to take a risk for following him. And this brings us to the connection in Proverbs 3. Again, these very familiar words, but we lose them. Trust in the Lord with all your heart, and do not lean on your own understanding. In all your ways, desire the presence of God, and he will make your paths straight and smooth. Bruce Waltke's commentary on this familiar passage says this: to know, in this sense, means personal knowledge, intimate experience with the person's reality. Christ had intimate knowledge of his Father, and he entrusted himself to him. Solomon is urging us in Proverbs 3 to do the same thing. Personal knowledge of God comes from risking oneself to obey the specific teachings of God. And we do that in full reliance on God to keep his promises coupled with them. In other words, we leave ourselves no option but to trust God when things are difficult. So this idea then, in all your ways desire his presence, and he will make your path straight. There's risk involved in this. This is not just some formula. This is saying, if I want to be where God wants me to be, if I want to honor him, I put my ways aside. I leave my idea of personal safety away. I put it away. And I embrace the things of God, even if it brings me great harm. You see, Christ in following God was brought great harm because he obeyed God. But God was honored, and you and I are the beneficiaries of that great sacrifice. If you will, the risk that Christ took. On one hand, there was no risk. On the other hand, he put himself aside. That's what Satan tried to tempt Jesus. You don't have to take the risk. You don't have to go through the pain. But Jesus knew he could entrust himself to the one who judges justly. If we're going to desire the presence of God, to know him with all of our heart and all of our ways, then we have to desire him as well. We have to desire the ability to trust God, to put aside our fears, to put aside our own idea of safety, and be driven by the power of God, the honor of God, to desire knowing God no matter what the personal cost to me. See, that's our connection with 1 Peter. We were called to this. We were called to desire God's presence in all that we do. Even if it means, quote unquote, putting ourselves at risk. We can't desire God if we want to protect ourselves. Jesus told us this on the Sermon on the Mount. You can't serve two masters. You can't serve your own personal safety and serve God. But oh, he is such a rich and faithful God. And if we desire his presence, he will pour it out to us in ways that we can't even imagine. So that's the thought for this night. Put aside your own fears and take that risk of knowing the God of creation. Rest well, and we'll see you tomorrow. Good night.